Was the consciousness of the apostles supposed to have been raised to the Arupa levels of the mind when they suddenly knew all languages after the initiation of Pentecost? R S Mead's response to this question, published in the Vahan in 1900. If the apostles, as a sober fact, actually did on a definite occasion know all languages, then we must suppose that their consciousness was raised to at least what have been called the formless levels of the mind, but which, as explained, are formless only to the consciousness below such levels. The believers in the actual historicity of the account in the Acts, however, supposed that this was a direct manifestation of the power of the Holy Spirit, which Spirit they further identify absolutely with God Himself. The question of the validity of the account as historical is entirely apart from the question of the possibility of such a happening. In my opinion, the account of the tongues of fire is a glorified description of some happening in the inner circles set forth with highly dramatic embellishments, but whether or not it refers to a particular initiation I am unable to say. Criticism connects the tradition with the common phenomenon among the outer untrained communities of speaking with tongues, but is exceedingly puzzled to account for the fact that the languages in the later Acts account are said to have been understood, whereas in the far earlier Pauline account the tongues required interpretation, and Paul himself evidently thought but little of such manifestations. That on the mind plane difference of language is no bar to communication is amply confirmed by the testimony of a number of our students. It is not so, however, on the so-called astral plane, where difference of language is almost as great a bar to satisfactory conversation as here. But the Acts account presents to us a series of difficulties, for it purports to describe what took place entirely on the physical plane. The questions that theologians ask themselves are therefore exceedingly puzzling. They would like to be informed, for instance, whether the apostles spoke each in his own language, and the various hearers heard their words each in his own tongue, or whether the power in the words was so great, that the hearers felt their force, and translated it each in his own words, or whether the apostles spoke in an unknown tongue and the hearers heard each in his own language, etc. Personally, though we deem it highly unphilosophical and absolutely unscientific to deny the possibility of such things happening, we reserve to ourselves the right of doubting the historicity of any particular account, especially when it emanates from a literary workshop, whose laborers had not the faintest notion of the sense of history, and who eagerly believed anything that enhanced the supernaturalness of their faith. The modern Evangelists, who still speak with tongues, are certainly not understood by the modern Elamites, Parthians, Medes and dwellers in Mesopotamia, like the members of the early communities among whom Paul carried on his propaganda. They require an interpreter, that is to say, someone who feels the inspiration but retains sufficient control of himself, generally herself, to express himself rationally.